One of the many tropes of noirs is a very messy, convoluted story. Mm-hmm. This is the start of it all.
Wait, say that again?
Where noir's story is secondary. In the fact, more messy and convoluted, the better it is for everybody. I watched many different movies of noirs, and you just don't care who the murderer is. It's the journey. And this is kind of the pinnacle of what I'm trying to say is convoluted stories.
Yeah, so with the film that we're talking about today, The Big Sleep, there was the original cut of the movie, and then the studio had a bunch of wartime films, and the war was coming to an end, so this was shelved to put out war movies. During the shelving time, the film was recut, and many of the plot elements were trimmed down heavily to focus on the characters. One of the producers was saying, well, people don't care about the plot line in these kinds of movies, as long as people get to see guns and bullets and people shooting and yelling. Right. And the film was very popular, and he said that proves my point. Now, the other version that came out in the 1997 removed or restored a bunch of the plot elements and removed some of those character elements. So there's a version of this movie that's plot-centric, and there's one that's character-centric. But I'm still not sure which one I saw.
Right. It's still convoluted.
So today we're talking about The Big Sleep, the convoluted story in front of the camera and the convoluted story behind the camera. Join us. Welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks again for finding us. Thanks for watching. And for our loyal fans, thank you to continue to support the show. You can follow the show on Twitter and on Instagram. We do have a Patreon. Check that out for some deals that tell us what to do. Both members, Kyle and I, of the Minnesota Film Critics Alliance. Check out the webpage for other critics' reviews as well as ours. Today we're going to talk about Raymond Chandler's first book made into a movie. Hard-boiled detectives about Catalyst, the start of them. It's Big Sleep.
So private detective Philip Marlowe is hired by an old general to deal with a blackmail situation between a bookseller and the general's daughter. After meeting both daughters, Marlowe discovers that everything is not quite as it seems, and if he can just avoid getting shot, he might be able to make sense of it all.
Now, I'm not going to ruin it for you. In the book, it's kind of laid down heavily, the ending. So the ending of it is the title, which is after all the events transpire, Philip Marlowe goes in office and wishes he was dead. He's so exhausted. What would it be like just to be dead and take a big sleep after all that?
That's not incorrect.
Which just makes this book, it's the whole story, much more funny when he goes back in his office and goes, God, I wish I was dead. Just don't have to deal with this anymore.
I did think about The Big Sleep as a title throughout the entirety of The Big Sleep because I was waiting for someone to say the line. Because I think one of my favorite things about noir films is when someone does say it in the movie, line. Right? You know, like I even think about Sin City when they said the hard goodbye or that yellow bastard, and I know those were stories from Sin City, so I was like, yes, drink, because they said the title. The Big Sleep
the whole point at the end. Yeah, the whole thing transpires, and I wish I was dead. Yeah. Okay, so this is Raymond Chandler's first book. I'm going to a little bit about Raymond Chandler. This is not the first movie about his stories. So Murder My Sweet, which is based on his second book, Farewell My Lovely, came out in 1944. The Big Sleep came out in 1946, and that's his first book. So Dick Powell played Philip Marlowe in Murder My Sweet.
Okay.
One of the things about Philip Marlowe, and I think Humphrey Bogart gets it absolutely right, there's a sense of detachment throughout everybody that he's involved in this movie. Even though there's not a personal, Sam Spade almost like there's in Maltese Falcon, there's almost a personal connection. It gets him a little more personal.
Yeah.
Here it's almost like he's just bouncing around like a pool ball at a round pool table. It's like, all right, I got to deal with this, I got to deal with that. But there's also a sense of coldness and detachment, even with Vivian that he likes. And I think that's why I enjoy The Big Sleep a little bit more as a character, but even though overall I like the Maltese Falcon as overall a film.
Yeah, I tend to stick on the Maltese Falcon side of things just because, again, I'm really heavy on plot. And someone warned me before I started watching this film. They said, grab a notepad. And I was like, what? What does that mean? And thankfully I had one, as I always do. Yeah. And I started the film, and I would pause predominantly and be like, okay, so this character did this to that guy. Yeah. And then as things would get noted, I would scratch them off like that. It reminded me when I was a kid and I used to have the characters listed on the bookmark of the book I was reading, so I could scratch them off.
Like where they cut, right?
Yeah, or something like that. I really liked Bogart's portrayal of the character, although I still do think I prefer Sam Spade because I do prefer the emotional connection that he brings to the table here. Yeah. And I think it's funny that the Maltese Falcon is kind of a nebulous story projectile. You know, it's
Right.
the MacGuffin, if you will. It's a meaningless artifact that is driving the story forward. And the confusion of the plot that has already happened is more important than the plot that happens in the film.
Yeah, you're
you know?
blackmailing people by creating dirty pictures
Exactly.
in movies.
Yeah, and then there's elements from this film that had to be cut out of the book because there was a homosexual relationship which you couldn't explicitly have.
Yeah,
back
Geiger
then.
has a boyfriend that kills Joe Brody.
Yeah, and then Geiger also runs a pornographic business, which is basically almost entirely removed. It's hinted at enough because it's still part of the main plot, but it's like, yeah, we're not going to talk about it really. We're just going to kind of move the story
In the back
along.
of the bookstore.
And part of it is probably helpful because the film is so confusing that most censors were probably watching it, and when they asked at the end, like, was there anything dirty in there? I don't think so. You know?
All right. Yeah. So overall, I think I like the introduction. You get the General Sternwood, and that was just very similar to what it's in the book. And then, but you have the induction, which is, you know, one of the unsung heroes, because we're going to talk about Lauren Bacall and the chemistry between her and Humphrey Bogart. But Martha Vickers playing the ditzy, playing it up as the Carmen, who's the most villainous person in the book. She's the catalyst. She's the cause of it all, because she will fool around with anybody, but she won't fool around with the chauffeur, and he gets mad. And he kills Geiger for it.
Well, and it sounds like Raymond Chandler, who saw a lot of the footage involved in the film, said that Vickers' performance was overshadowing Bacall's, and the studio knew that Bacall and Bogart were a big thing and had, of course, the relationship of two. They knew that they would get more people in the seats, so that Vickers' stuff was actually, a lot of it was cut out of the film. So that might be why. I still think she does overshadow Bacall.
I see, yeah.
But you're right. Yeah, if she's a bigger character in the book and not as much so here, it's because she was overshadowing so much. And I think hers is probably I might say my favorite performance. It might even be my favorite, even over Bogart's, because I think that she does steal every scene she's in, and she's got a certain 60s, 70s kind of quality to her performance where she does push the envelope. And that's kind of unseen for a 46 film.
But it's all, even if you read the book, it's all an act. It's her acting dumb and stupid and coy to get what she wants. And when she doesn't get what she wants, she gets, murdering.
Yeah.
But it's all an act of, I'm friendly and cute, and, how can you discipline me when I look so cute and everything? But she's just poison, which is a great noir trope of those who are going to murder you actually sweet and charming and all that stuff to you. But the thing is it doesn't work on Philip Marlowe at all.
Yeah, I think that's because he's got a disconnection
that,
from everybody. Yeah. He's even he has, of course, the chemistry with Bacall because of the relationship and the cheating on his wife, but
it's that
because of that
detachment.
Yeah, he even has this kind of detachment from everybody, even her, where he's kind of like, nope, you're coming on to me. No, and everything he has is just kind of backing away.
Tried to jump on my lap when I was standing up.
Yeah. The only time I think I can feel any even just kind of, not even emotional connection, but a physical connection is with the bookshop proprietor. Where like I was telling you before we recorded, where she's got the moment where she pulls down the curtain so no one can see when they're making friendly with each other. Yeah. And that's the only time I really see any physical attraction to anything, because he's kind of keeping everything behind the door.
So with Raymond Chandler, one of the best things I like his books but the dialogue. I think Raymond Chandler really wins out on dialogue. He describes rooms very detailed. He's super detailed about rooms, George R.R. Martin is about details, but not so heavily.
Yeah.
But he can describe and articulate sceneries and scenes. But it's the dialogue that wins you over. This volley of dialogue that just still it's in the movie. It's really charming and actually funny. It's sometimes actually pretty funny.
Well, and that's what's so interesting too is you have a Raymond Chandler novel adapted by William Faulkner, the novelist.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
And Lee Brackett, who many current genre fans are going to recognize from, of course, The Empire Strikes Back. So we've got those kind of
the first draft
things that keep on moving through there. And of course, Brackett she became enticed by No Good for a Corpse, which was the story that inspired by The Maltese Falcon. Basically, she read The Maltese Falcon, saw the movie. She wrote No Good for a Corpse, and that was what got her the job writing this film. So she was basically birthed by the Bogart films and went on to create one of the more iconic ones.
So if you didn't know, Howard Hawks, who also did Scarface, I believe, the first Scarface, but when he got assigned to do the film, he rounded up a bunch of writers that he knew, including William Faulkner, to craft the story.
Yep.
And it's one of those writers' rooms. Let's crap it out and see what happens. But it's really weird that William Faulkner, who did The Sound of Fury, was in the room writing the screenplay.
Yeah, which actually makes a lot of sense if you've read the first 50 pages of The Sound and the Fury and you realize, I don't know what the hell's going on 50 pages into that book.
I watched the movie in it.
Yeah, because the whole first part of that book, first 50 pages, is from a character who has a few mental, like, incapabilities where he's not really seeing the timeline in the events in the order that they take place, and so it's a very dream logic kind of
stream of consciousness,
if you will.
James Joyce
very few periods, very few punctuation modes. It's just kind of all being, given out to you that way. And when that happens, you end up 50 pages in going, I don't know what I just read before. And that's kind of how a good chunk of this movie is. And like I said, go into it with a notepad, you'll be able to figure it out. But there's a lot there.
There's also an element of stupidity. I think is the theme of being smart and being really dumb and falling on your egos. Yeah, because Marlowe's always talking about there's so many dumb people with guns around.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a fumbling of stupidity of bad guys are bad because they can't work inside society's realm. So when they go outside society, it's because they're too dumb to do anything else. Not to mention they're dumb to get killed all the time.
Yeah, Marlowe's really the smart man in the dumb room throughout the entire film because every character who isn't him isn't very intelligent. Even our villains in the film are not people that I was particularly thinking like, oh, that person's going to end up winning, this person's going to end up doing this. Marlowe is basically outwitting every person in every single room he's in, and that normally could be a problem because you have too strong of a hero character where everything comes to it, but because the audience is actually more along the lines of the villains where we don't know what the hell's happening for a good Polk, he informs us and kind of gives us the nuggets that we need to survive the narrative, if you will.
So, like when he does when General Sternwood hires him to do work, Philip Marlowe, it's a great start of when you introduce your character for the first time. It's not only an interview, but we get introduced to Philip Marlowe. That he says, I'm college educated and I got fired for insubordination. There you go. That's all you need to know about him. Right?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
But he still keeps tabs with everybody at the office. So, right, he's a man about town, but he's not street smart. He's educated. He's accomplished. And God, he just wants to die after getting involved with this.
Yeah, and it's funny to note that Sam Spade and Philip Marlowe, probably two of his most famous characters, especially in this realm, were both very popular hard-boiled detective serialized stories, basically.
Yeah, this is like the caricature that starts. Yeah.
And I'm trying to think to myself, he didn't portray those characters more than once. He did once each, right? He didn't do Marlowe again, did he?
No.
Yeah, and he didn't do Sam Spade again. So it's interesting that they were both characters that had many, many stories associated with them.
Yeah.
And yet he only got to portray them both once.
Yeah, and then becomes a caricature, a staple, a template for what you do for hard-boiled detective. The Big Sleep is the first kind of spawned the hard-boiled detective story. And so you can see where it is of the life is very rough. These characters are not, anybody's not really living a clean life, very brutal. And you for the code of the time, you're talking about subjects that are a little bit, of the dumb sides, back alley stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
As well as two rich girls. Femme fatales,
Which they would have been Instagram models if the film was made today.
Exactly, right.
Influencers,
Influencers. They totally would be, right. So I don't know if you did your research, Kyle. I don't know if you.
I did my research.
I think the entire movie is that shot in studio. I think even Geiger's house is built inside a studio.
It does look like a studio.
Yeah.
I never got a yes or no on that, to be honest.
I think it's 100%.
But what's funny about his home is it actually looked a little bit like the same location as the Ma and Pa Kettle films. The house is different, but it does look like the same outside landscape, which leads me to believe it might be a studio regular utilized landscape that might have been put into those films.
I think it's 100% in studio, in the warehouse, even though they shoveled in all the dirt and put it in there and all the trees and everything.
And that would make sense because, again, every time he's outside, the camera's not really focused on the vista. It's very much in on the action that he's involved with, which could lead to be hey, it doesn't look as realistic. We kind of zoom in a little bit.
Right. I think that's another trope of film noir is you focus, really condense the room. And when I made my noir comic book, everybody from the shoulders up, and it's very claustrophobic. It's not grand in scale. It's always intimate, close proximity. But right, I think it's all in studio. And if they shoveled in tons of dirt just to get the dirt road in there and they put trucks in, that's amazing.
Yeah, because it is convincing enough. It works within the frame. I wasn't thinking that it was a set when I was watching the film, but you're right. It does look a little bit like one we've seen before.
Especially when you go to Eddie Mars's gambling house. That looks like it's all built. Doesn't have really much a ceiling.
Yeah, and I think like not as a slight to noir at all, but like in those kinds of realms of you do have your kind of your basic sets. You have your downstairs
Very
gambling
basic,
hall.
right.
You've got your detective's office. You've got a lot of places that you would visit in those classic kinds of stories. I almost feel like you could have made a real killing back in the time period by having all those things set up and just kind of rifling noir in one after the other and kind of taking care of those scenes. So it wouldn't surprise me that most of the stuff was set.
Or redone sets.
Yeah.
Or redone sets. But I think if they did that, that's amazing. There is a remake of this with Robert Mitchum.
Oh, okay.
From the 70s. In the 70s, Robert Mitchum did some Philip Marlowe films. So I did Farewell, My Lovely, and then I also did The Big Sleep. There's a remake of this. And it's actually, since it's the 70s, they actually do a lot of the stuff that's in the book that they couldn't do at the time. So, if you want to check that out. Also stars Oliver Reed. So any movie that has Oliver Reed in it, you have to...
I mean, that's going to get my wife to
Maybe
watch.
we should talk about the remake also. Yeah.
When I saw the 70s one, there's always that question, because The Big Sleep is kind of story that, like, that title could apply to almost anything. It could accidentally be another film altogether. So I had to check to make sure that it was a remake, because as I looked it up, I was like, oh, there's another title right there.
I told you, noirs, you have to have either dark or big in your title.
Yep. But it's like my wife and I were watching the movie The Cursed the other day, and it's like I was looking up online. There's like 40 movies called The Cursed, and I was like, I got to find the right one here because they're all called this. It's like those repetitious kind of titles and the things you would see kind of do blend in over time, even with unrelated properties. But yeah, I had to figure out that this was actually a remake.
You think of if we had a category with all the movies that just have the word big in it, we would just fill up our library. We would never stop.
I have my movie shelves alphabetized, and big does take up a good chunk on that.
Yes.
Yeah. What's funny here too is that I want to see a film about the behind the scenes, because there's apparently all these little stories that I found very captivating about the behind the scenes of this film. Things like
you're right.
Hawks was given $50,000 to secure the rights to the book, and he apparently only paid $5,000 or $10,000 for them.
Blew it at the bar.
He kept the rest of the money and just went away. Or that Brackett and Faulkner both had a deal where they basically each of them adapted different chapters of the novel, and then kind of like looked at each other's work and molded it together, which I found very fascinating.
That's a good word. Yeah,
it's the same process Stephen King and Peter Straub had when writing The Talisman. Was a book that they both wrote together. Was they each did separate chapters, and then they traded chapters and rewrote each other's work.
My friend John Beck did that with another female writer. I wrote this chapter and see what you can go with it. And she, and then they kind of they came out with a book.
Yeah, and then you of course have the famous William Faulkner was not a fan of Hollywood stories, so he asked if he could work from home. They all thought he meant his apartment in Hollywood, and he meant Mississippi.
He's going to go back to the South.
He went back to his home, and everybody was really concerned where the heck he went. He was like, I went home. You guys told me I could go home.
Well, nowadays there's no problem. You just do a Zoom meet, right?
Exactly, yeah.
I'm still in Mississippi, right? Yeah.
I had one other thing I thought was really funny about the film is that that's the score apparently was so popular for this film that it started appearing in 50s television shows that couldn't afford a score. So most notably, the television series Maverick in the 1950s uses a lot of the score elements from this film when they couldn't afford to score it.
It's that beat of when there's really nothing going on and you have like, dude, it's almost like you're in the waiting room. Mm-hmm. That kind of music, like we're waiting for the action to start. This kind of, yeah. I can see that.
I don't know if you've ever had this, but I've had films before where I'm listening to it, and I'm watching the film, I'm listening to the score, and I all of a sudden realize, oh, this is where that score is. I had that with The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, where I've never seen the movie, but when someone pointed out that wah, 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 I was like, oh my God, that's from that film? I have that with Psycho and Reanimator, because they use the same kind of score. Actually, it's just basically remade for that film.
Okay.
And so when I hear that, like, I heard the score here, and I was like, oh, I know this score. And then I couldn't figure out, do I know it from some 50s TV show I watched as a kid, or do I know it just because it's The Big Sleep and it's popular? I can't remember, but it's kind of part of my head brain now. It's very weird.
You're right, because maybe they didn't, it had a public domain, it could just accessible.
Yeah, and I'm sure at the time, again, we didn't have these movies re-released often, so you could kind of get away. And it's like, again, like the Swan Lake thing in The Mummy and Dracula. You could get away with popping that in there because the movie wasn't re-released that often. Who's gonna call it out? We can, skirt some corners right there, which is funny because you have a Max Steiner score who did Casablanca, Arsenic and Old Lace, who is very iconic for his scores, and this is one that pervades other works.
Right, because we can't really show you or listen to the music of it, but the score of the movie is a very important part of watching the movie. Mm-hmm. So you get the whole I can see just the yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Cinematographer is Sidney Hickox.
Hickox, I believe.
Hickox, yeah. Surprisingly, he actually directed a couple episodes of I Love Lucy. So, which I now see why I Love Lucy look almost sometimes like a noir. But yeah, Sidney Hickox. If you want, he was cinematographer for many years. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Did
So
To Have and Have Not, White Heat, did a number of
To Have and Have Not. That's Lauren Bacall's first movie.
Was that Bogart and Bacall?
Yeah, their first movie together.
They filmed that, I believe. So they had filmed one film before this and one film after this, and then those things got shuffled because this movie got shelved for the wartime film. So I'm not sure the order of shooting, but I know it came out before it.
Yes.
I can't
yeah,
figure
I
out
understand what
the
you mean.
shooting. Yeah.
Yeah. But released To Have and Have Not came out first. That was
Yeah.
Lauren Bacall's first movie. Right?
And I think they did 4 films together, if I'm correct.
Yes.
Which is funny because I hadn't realized that it was something that they had done repeated times. I just assumed that The Big Sleep was such an iconic film that they were remembered for their performance during the time.
And she already has that smoker's voice already.
Yeah.
At such a young age.
Yeah, because I'd seen a lot of older Bacall, where she's older in a film more recent. But I hadn't seen much like 40s Bacall. And I was like, oh, yeah, I can tell. I can tell it's her.
Isn't it amazing in the scene that you couldn't show a woman's knee, and they still had to do that in the movie? Like, go ahead.
Is that why?
And that was supposed to be scandalous.
Okay, because I knew certain things have been changed. Like, of course, like the book has nude scenes with Carmen's character, and they had to basically put her in.
But
these,
in the
like,
movie,
frocky
in the movies, you
90s.
couldn't show a woman's knees. It's like because the after code, pre-code, what the heck? But but it was a joke. Like, go ahead. It's like it shows what the hell's the big deal?
Now I want to figure out what the first knee in film is. I always go back to I always reference the Psycho.
All the first movies were all naked people.
Yeah. Yeah, but I always go back to the, like, in the common nomenclature, like, the flushing toilet, the woman in her bra and panties in Psycho. I want to find out what the first post-code knee is. That's my project for today.
So, overall, have you seen The Big Sleep? Don't sleep on it.
Yeah, and if you can go down in the comments section, tell us who killed the chauffeur. Because that's the thing
Raymond
going
Chandler
on.
doesn't even know.
Yeah, so, side note really quick, the writers of the film, Brackett and Faulkner, and of course Jules Furman did a pass of it as well. They contacted Raymond Chandler because they couldn't figure out in the book who killed the chauffeur. Raymond Chandler contacted them back and said, "You idiots, just read the book. It's in the book." And then he read the book and realized it wasn't in the book and said, "I don't know. Make it up yourself." So one cut of the film has an answer and one cut does not. My cut did not. So let us know in the comment section.
I think the one
who
on
killed the
TCM
chauffeur.
does not.
Yeah, the one on the HBO didn't. So
Yeah.
the mystery is still up to us, but you can let us know down in the comment section below exactly, did you follow what was going on in this movie? Because I barely could with notes.
I always want to ask Geiger, what the hell are you doing? Because you're going to get murdered. If you're going to have, like, some rich guy's daughter in your movies, and you're going to try to... You're going to get murdered.
And that happens a lot, though. That wasn't like, the nice guys
Of course,
and
there's
stuff
no
like
smart
that,
people in
too.
the movie.
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
smart, usually the noir trope is guys are dumb.
Yep. Even Marlowe makes some silly notions, but he's a smart brain person who doesn't always do the right thing.
Yep.
But, smart guy in a dumb room. Let us know your thoughts on the film The Big Sleep down in the comments section before. Did you enjoy the film? Did it leave you big sleeping? Let us know what you thought about it down there. And should we cover another Howard Hawks film? I've been meaning to get my hands on Red River, so please let us know if we should cover that one on a future episode of the show. Yeah. And hey, you can tell us exactly what you want us to cover. No questions asked. Well, some questions asked. By joining the Patreon down below. Tiers as low as $1, but if you join at that $5 tier, you get to help you on our rotation of our patrons who pick the movies for us. If you don't like what we're covering today, great. Join the Patreon. Tell us what to cover tomorrow. And hey, don't forget too, you can also like and subscribe. There are 2 free things that you can do to make sure that you never miss an episode of the show. Yes. Until next time, you can find my film reviews over at goldfilmreviews.com.
You can find my podcast, the St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts. And I'm not going to go through the keyhole like Peter Pan.
No.